Welcome everyone to our study of Journey Without Goal. And as always, kindly generate the enlightened intention, recognizing the value of what we're doing in terms of addressing the suffering that there is in the world. And presently then, sorry, okay. Just a sec. Okay. So we're back. There's a lot of value in studying a text like this, because Trungpa Rinpoche has this incredible grasp of Western culture. Trungpa Rinpoche was able to communicate in ways that very often are difficult when we are sort of going between two cultures, the traditional culture of Asian societies, and you could say traditional Buddhism, and the modern world. It's very often difficult to translate concepts, and that's where Trungpa Rinpoche really was unique, and his approach really is unique. There's never ever a time where what Trungpa Rinpoche is teaching us is not, you could say, traditional Buddhism. And that's not necessarily, you could say, a virtue in itself that we have to have traditional Buddhism, but it's just that there is a complete science, a complete and utter, you could say, mapping and a body of knowledge, which has nothing to do with cultures as such. And Trungpa Rinpoche is continually drawing on exactly that. So that's where sometimes when things are being sort of made too simple or too sort of easy to understand, or we're sort of we might think that the teacher is being user friendly, but sometimes also the teacher then fails in actually conveying the subtlety and all the aspects of the teaching. And that's where it's extraordinary when we have somebody who both has the learning and the realization and also the grasp of the language of the audience, who can actually communicate something like this. So like I say, once again, then we bring to this study then the intention of applying this on our own path with the awareness of the need for really being present in engaging with the suffering of the world. This is the attitude of bodhicitta that we begin all study and practice with. So presently then we're within the section on empowerment. And let's see here. So let's see. So Trungpa Rinpoche says here, and of course we've already then covered a lot of ground in terms of empowerment, but here at the end then Trungpa Rinpoche speaks a little bit more general about what the nature of, you could say, the experiential nature of approaching this, and also in terms of his own process. I'm just going to go back a little bit, one paragraph where we ended last time, and just repeat this, where Trungpa Rinpoche says, in going through the landscape of the tantric tradition, I have been very careful not to introduce the juicy tidbits at the beginning. I'm very faithful and orthodox and presenting and presenting the tradition in the same way that it was presented to me. To begin with, we need panic. We need a sense of nervousness or uncertainty. It is absolutely necessary. And then, having gone through such a period, we arrive at the point at which we're capable of receiving Abhisheka. Then we're much more at home, and we're complemented by our teacher in our world. I experienced this myself in my training in Tibet. So what we're speaking about here is a complete commitment to the path. So this is where we're not just approaching Buddhism in terms to have a bit of peace of mind, but very much with this complete attitude of bodhicitta, that there's an enormous project that we're undertaking. It is liberating all sentient beings, and it's done with an awareness that we present this innate sanity that is basic to us, and through the practice of meditation and through study, we become sensitized to this sanity and this nature, and we become clear on what it is that we need to eliminate and what it is that we need to realize. And with that, then, there's a complete 100% investment in which we're putting ourselves entirely on the line. And that's where we don't really go to this just with a sort of laid back attitude. There's us who's learning something. There's something immense that we're engaging with. And you could say that the immensity and the importance of that leaves us with a sense of the greatness leads to this, what Trungpa Rinpoche here is talking about. We need panic. There is an awareness of what is at stake, and also an awareness of our own neurosis. And that's where we are completely engaged and possibly living in an uncertainty. We're going through a process, and that's where the process is very much about us beginning to experience groundlessness. And that's where we, as ordinary sentient beings, we're always trying to preserve ourselves in terms of sustaining a ground that actually isn't there. And so that's where the experience and the process of familiarizing ourselves with this vast expanse that doesn't come with the familiar ground that we are in our delusion are trying to create. And so there's a whole process that takes place, and in this process also we're relating with the lineage, we're relating with persons that have come out on the other side, freedom and so forth. So that's where we are aware of our own sort of present neurosis, and at the same time also, as there's this breaking point that we're approaching in being, you could say, empowered and in becoming part of the lineage, then we're taken to this place then of us feeling very uncertain. So that's something that all tantrikas necessarily need to go through. Otherwise, you know, you could have the situation where there's a very nice teacher who just say, well, you know, the nature of your mind, this is it, and it's very simple. But if we haven't actually been through a process where we are completely 100% invested, then we might just sort of go, oh yeah, that's okay, you know. One of my friends was present when a very important person, no names shall be mentioned, but a very important person in Hollywood who was liking the Tibetans and the Dzogchen teachings, had an old Tibetan Lama over, and this celebrity says, okay, Mr. Lama, and he already had a relationship to this teacher, but he says, you know, let's cut through all the stuff, you know, and just get straight to the heart of things. I want the piss of what you have to offer, you know. And the old Lama, who was very direct himself, he liked that kind of directness. And he said, okay, well, we'll do that. And then he proceeded then basically to give the highest Ati teachings. But of course, with that comes a way of giving it, which is, first of all, explaining the context, the history, and so forth. And as the old Lama was about, just had sort of been teaching somewhat, but nowhere near, you could say, completing or even sort of beginning the main part. This celebrity says, "Look, could you hurry up a bit, because I have a taxi that's going to be showing up here in in not so long. So could we please get this over with?" And you can see, of course, my friend that was present was realized the sort of the sad situation there. And the old Lama had the best of intention, and it's not as if this celebrity was a bad person as such. It's just a lack of having actually investment. This person was more concerned about the the meeting that he had to go to. So that's where we need our complete being to be on the line. So Trungpa Rinpoche then continues, "In my education, I was constantly criticized. If I leaned back, I was criticized and told that I should sit up. I was told that I should always make pleasant conversations with visiting dignitaries and that I should be hospitable to them. At that level, the training was very simple and not particularly tantric. Every time I did something right, or thought I did something right, I was criticized even more heavily. I was cut down constantly by my tutor. He slept in the corridor outside my door, so I could not even get out. He was always there, always watching me. He would be serving me and watching me at the same time. My other teachers would all work through him so that they themselves did not have to put embarrassing pressure on me. Instead, they could pressure my tutor, and in turn my tutor would pressure me, which I thought was very clever. It was also very claustrophobic and somewhat painful. I was constantly cut down. I had been brought up strictly since infancy, from the age of 18 months, so that I had no other reference point, such as the idea of freedom or being loose. I had no idea what it was like to be an ordinary child playing in the dirt or playing with toys or chewing on rusted metal or whatever. Since I did not have any reference point, I just thought that was the way the world was. I felt somewhat at home, but at the same time, I felt extraordinarily hassled and claustrophobic. It did not feel so good. At the same time, I knew there were little breaks, like going to the bathroom, which was an enormous relief. The only time I was not being watched was when I went to the bathroom. It was my own one free time. Usually I would feel an enormous rush of fresh air because bathrooms were built overhanging cliffs, on overhanging cliffs, and had big holes in the floor. I would feel the fresh air coming up, and at the same time, I would know that nobody was watching me, telling me how to defecate properly. Apart from that, I was always watched. Even when I ate, I was watched and told how to eat properly, how to extend my arm, how to watch the cup, how to bring it to my mouth. If I made a big noise while swallowing, I was criticized for eating crocodile style. I was told that Rinpoches, or other important Tugos, were not supposed to swallow crocodile style. Everything was very personal from that point of view, to say the least. So we could say, some people might say, well, that's a very medieval approach. And there is very often within, this is almost inherent to modernity, to sort of sustain a rather colonialist attitude that at the end of the day, the civilization that emerged from Europe and America and so forth is superior. And so we're in a position of criticizing other cultures. There's a lot to be said about that, and to bypass that whole discussion, I would just like to say we should at least be open to appreciating that what we have here is a tradition that for a very long time really has sustained and nurtured and brought to fruition some extraordinary individuals. So that's where we can't entirely just say, well, this wasn't the right thing to do. We might just remain open and say, oh, that's another way of doing it. And as we look at, you could say, the way that we bring up children nowadays, we can question whether or not it really is something that ultimately brings about happiness. I myself have lived in monastic settings, and while many of the monastic settings that I lived in were very male dominated, it's also interesting that these males, so to speak, were not exactly alien to their own, you could say, femininity or their softness, not exactly the kind of male kind of societies that we sometimes stereotypify. But the long and the short is that a lot of softness really exists within this, and undoubtedly these teachers would have been very committed really to Trungpa Rinpoche, and a very deep respect intrinsic to this discipline. And also, in terms of ourselves, we notice that when we become students of Buddhism, and particularly then when we have particular teachers, gurus, we ourselves, even though we're not living with the teacher very much becomes part of us. I think all of us are familiar with the notion of questioning, what would my teacher do? What would my teacher say? And even if we're not having questions, we might even just have the presence of the teacher somewhat haunting us. Sometimes when I'm taking out little insects from where I live, you know, I'm gathering some ants that are here. I remember a young woman who was a student of Dingpo Chenzo Rinpoche, who would always be very, very careful with all the little insects, and the memory of her and her voice when she would be concerned for little critters and being careful not to harm them when we're moving them and so forth comes back to me. At other times, you know, my teacher, when I would be taking things very seriously, the idea of my teacher sort of laughing at my overly seriousness or whatever comes to me. So I think we all have that experience. So we could say that we all, in some way or another, experience this claustrophobia, that the teacher somewhat lives with us. If not, you could even say to the degree that it even haunts us. Trungpa Rinpoche then continues. Then, very interestingly, I stopped struggling with the authorities, so to speak, and began to develop. I just went on and on and on. Finally, the whole world began to become my reference point rather than being a hassle, although the world was full of hassles. At that point, my tutor seemed to become afraid of me. He began to say less, and my teachers began to teach me less because I was asking them too many questions. I was interested in what they had to say and pursued them for more and more, so that they began to have a more relaxed approach than even I wanted. So this again is where there's the surrender, and with that something incredible opens up. Of course, we can't really sort of dangle this as a carrot, but this is something that, of course, is intrinsic to this giving birth or going beyond this breaking point. My tutor, and this is referring to, actually, if you read in Tibet, I think he was called Abu Karma, but this is described in Born in Tibet. And also, I think it was in volume 3 of Ocean of Profound, the treasure, what is it? The Ocean of Profound, the Ocean of Profound Treasure, or something like that. This is Trungpa Rinpoche's 3 volumes, sort of the teachings from his seminar. In the Vajrayana section, he actually describes also some where the teachers just were impossibly tough on him. Anyway, this tutor, the one who was making life very claustrophobic for him, he says, my tutor was frightened because he did not know exactly how to handle me. I thought that maybe this was all some kind of joke, and that my teachers would leave me alone for 10 days and then catch me again. But the 10 days went by, and a month went by, and finally 6 months, and nothing changed. The situation just went on and on. Something was actually working. Something was finally beginning to click. The discipline had become part of my system. My tutors and my teachers were pushed by me instead of my being pushed by them. I wanted to know more and more about what was happening, and they began to run out of questions. They were hassled by me because I was so wholehearted. They became afraid that they could not keep up with me anymore. So I think the key word here really is wholehearted, in that the teaching really had become entirely part of Trungpa Rinpoche in this process, and that, of course, is where there's no separation between one's own being and the teacher and the teaching. So Trungpa then says, I'm telling you this because there are parallels between my own experience and that of other Tantra students. It's a question of interest. Once you're really into something, you become part of that experience, or it becomes part of you. When you become part of the teachings, you're no longer hassled. You're no longer an entity separate from the teachings. You are an embodiment of them. That is the basic point. And this, of course, also is where we go beyond the teaching existing as some sort of higher moral imperative and ourselves as falling short. That's where we would say, oh yeah, I should be doing this, but I'm not, and I'm a bad person, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the teaching exists apart from us. And we continually reconstruct ourselves as being incapable. So that's where it's so important that we actually are on the path and going beyond that, and as being then on the path integrating the teaching, then the teaching becomes us to the point where there's no longer this sort of gap between what we ought to be and what we are. Then we simply are. We are the teaching. There's no longer any kind of notion that there's some authority or some higher ideal that we should be living up to. So this, of course, is incredibly interesting, and I'll just see if there's any questions in regards to this. What does Chögyam Trungpa mean by panic? The experience of groundlessness, and of course, this we experience right from the beginning on the path. Or rather, no, not exactly. At the beginning of the path, we really have this sense of we've found something really valuable, and the practice of meditation provides peace. But then there's the habitual patterns that no longer necessarily are being fed in terms of us being obedient to our habitual patterns. We might have impulses that arise, and we don't necessarily right away tag along with those impulses. And that's where we might have some sense of groundlessness, because the impulses might be part of our sense of identity. You know, I am this terrible person, or I have this habit, and that's just who I am. And then we just perpetuate that. And that's actually staying within the sort of the little sort of warm, fuzzy comfort zone that isn't being challenged. It's once we say, no, I'm not going to necessarily tag along with that voice or that impulse. Then there's a sense of groundlessness. Then what? And that's where panic sets in at a very early stage, but particularly then in the context of the tantric teachings, then there's a greater investment, and the teacher might present us with greater challenges. Then someone says, I'm glad to hear, and then says, okay, got it. Panic maybe as realization we may have had it wrong all along. That too. You know, the questioning mind is also something that's a habitual pattern. And just leaving it, there might be questions that are not answered. We might just stay with not having our questions answered. And maybe all of a sudden, the questions themselves, they dissolve. That happens. Yeah. But that actually is going through this groundlessness. And that's where panic is groundlessness is very, very important. I'm glad to hear that our daughter and I aren't the only ones that save insects and lizards. Our daughter cries if they get hurt. Oh yeah. No, throughout the Buddhist teaching, there's a lot of awareness of the plight and the experience of beings of the other realms, like animals and so forth. Even to the extent that also, a lot of awareness also of what ghosts might experience. Like Tibetans, they'll be very careful with slamming doors, because we have different realms where beings are trapped. And so there are beings that are trapped in, for example, doors, or trapped in different places. So there's a lot of just awareness of these things. I don't know if it was here that I mentioned, but just a week ago or so on BBC, there was some news about a declaration that scientists, and we're talking mainstream scientists, including Stephen Hawking and others, who have actually signed a declaration where the declaration basically states that they assert that, to the best of what they can understand, animals have consciousness. And you'll probably be aware that until now, not of course in Buddhist circles, but in mainstream science, that the idea is that it's only humans that have consciousness. And whether or not fish or animals have consciousness is kind of, we don't really know. Well, these scientists, they would then basically assert that that as far as they can say, yes, animals do have consciousness. And this is an important big step forward in terms of our awareness of others. So yes, as much as we'd be careful not to run people over in pedestrian crossings, then we also would want to be very careful that the insects and the lizards aren't hurt. Yes, the profound treasure of the ocean of the profound treasure of the ocean of the Dharma. That's right. Volume 3. Yes, in there Trungpa Rinpoche talks about being put through some, what was it? He had hurt his finger, and yet even though he had hurt his finger, he still had to do calligraphy class, and it was freezing cold. So the metal of the pen was getting stuck onto this place where his finger was hurt, and the teacher was adamant that he continue his calligraphy class. Very tough on him, and yeah, even more. Okay, so this is Vajradhara, and so then being and manifesting. Trungpa Rinpoche says the tantric approach is not mystical experience alone, but it is concerned with how we can perceive reality in a simple and direct way. In our normal, confused or samsaric way of perceiving and handling the world, we experience reality on the level of body, on the level of emotions, and on the level of mindlessness, which is traditionally known as basic ignorance. Body refers to basic self-consciousness, which includes the various sense perceptions, thoughts, vision, sound, taste, touch, and smell. Emotion includes aggression, passion, ignorance, jealousy, pride, and all other emotions and feelings. Mindlessness, or basic ignorance, refers to the state of total bewilderment. Fundamentally, we have no idea what we're doing and what we're experiencing. We are completely missing the point all the time. Those three major principles, body, emotions, and mindlessness, are how we experience life. Excuse me. Now, again, this is an example really of Trungpa Rinpoche, you could say, giving us rather, you could say, user-friendly explanation for something that very often is very daunting when it is explained in terms of the language of Abhidharma. This is, in fact, what Trungpa Rinpoche is talking about here is what we call the 8 consciousnesses, where the first group has to do with the consciousnesses of the 5 senses and then also thoughts. So he says here, thought, vision, sound, taste, touch, and smell. These are the six consciousnesses. And then we have what's known as the nyönyi, which is the, what we could say, afflicted mind, which are the emotions. And that's basically where the ego, you could say it's the intelligence of ego that has to do with how, you know, just the afflicted states of aggression, passion, and so on. Basically the kleshas. So that's the 7th consciousness. And then there's the 8th consciousness, which is then the alaya, the all ground or the storehouse consciousness, which is the basic, like Trungpa Rinpoche says, mindlessness. Such a good term. This basic unconsciousness. And it's on the basis of that where we originate, on the basis of the initial basic ignorance, mindlessness, unconsciousness, then we misunderstand the nature of reality, and we take the nature of consciousness to being an I, and the nature of luminosity of this consciousness to be other and display. And that's where we have duality, the sense of self and other. And from that, then there's the struggle of ego. And that's where you have then the seventh consciousness, the afflicted consciousness. And then we have, on the basis of that, the experience of our individuality that then operates with the various perceptions, the first six consciousnesses. So here we basically have a sort of a summary, really, of the basics of Abhidharma and the basics of really how we construct our experience. So again, this is where Abhidharma is not at all theoretical in any way. Everything that we're discussing in the Abhidharma and everything that Trungpa is talking about here has to do with what we experience at every micro moment of our existence. Nothing abstract and that at all. It's about how we go through life. But of course, what we're trying to, what the objective of the Dharma is getting down to this basic ignorance and clearing up this. But we do this by the skillful means of working with our immediate experience, not dreaming about what possibly could be in some transcendent reality or whatever, you know, or dropping a tab of acid that might sort of propel us into some sense of something alternative reality, but very much working with the nitty-gritty of what we are right now, every moment. And this we can't call mysticism in any way. It's the very opposite of mysticism. It is really introducing a direct way of relating to our world. And this is where we could step out of the complications that our mindlessness has constructed, and we could introduce a connection, a method for connecting us with reality through mindfulness and being properly present in our reality. We have this amazingly simple choice of actually being present and wholehearted participants in our reality, rather than just being buffeted around powerlessly within this condition of mindlessness. So this is where it makes a lot of sense to relate to our experience. So this is where we're now talking about these three levels of body, emotions, and the basic condition of our consciousness, which in this case, when we're not, you could say, practitioners that are integrating meditation, is essentially mindlessness. So to begin with the first, Trungpa says, by body, to begin with, we mean an actual physical body. Bodies may be well-shaped, fat or thin, functional or non-functional. Some bodies see but cannot hear. Some bodies hear but cannot see. Some bodies feel but cannot see or hear. Some bodies hear and see but cannot feel. And some bodies can do the whole thing. There are all kinds of bodies, and there are all kinds of physical experiences, depending on whether we are lame or deaf or dumb or completely healthy. Still, we have the same basic experience, that is, the experience of the body, the experience of reality at that very simple level. In the sutras, the Buddhist scriptures, Buddha once said to Ananda, Ananda, if there is no body, there is no Dharma. If there is no food, there is no Dharma. If there are no clothes, there is no Dharma. Take care of your body for the sake of Dharma. Body is extremely important in the tantric tradition. However, we don't make a personal trip out of it. We could become a vegetarian and sneer at meat eaters. We could wear pure cotton clothing and renounce wearing any leather. Or we could decide to search for a country to live in that is free from pollution. But any of those approaches could be going too far. When someone becomes a vegetarian, he or she stops eating meat, but they still might take a bloodthirsty delight in peeling bananas and crunching their teeth into peaches and cooking eggplants as meat substitutes. So our attempts to relate with the body can become very complicated. I'm not particularly advocating eating meat or otherwise at this point. Rather, I am pointing out that we do not accept our body as it is, and we do not accept our world. We are already searching for some way to have an easy ride. When we feel unhappy or uncomfortable, we think we would like to go somewhere else, up or down or wherever. Some people call it hell, some people call it heaven, but whatever it is, we would like to have an easy ride somewhere. And this, of course, persists in a remarkably familiar fashion, that we think in terms of, I'd like to be somewhere else. If I didn't have these circumstances, if I didn't have my job, if I didn't have my present all the hassles that annoy me, I could practice the Dharma. And that's where this is where we're resenting our bodily situation, and we're kind of procrastinating, thinking things should be different. If only this wasn't happening, then things would be all right. I'd like to get out. I'd like to get away. Trungpa continues then, it's actually quite humorous how we view the cosmos, our world. We view it as if it were not a real world at all, but a world we could control. Sometimes we treat the world as a problem child who's trying to suggest all kinds of evil things to us. Sometimes we treat our world as a priest or master who is telling us that everything is good, that whatever we do is fine. There are flowers, there are meadows, there is wildlife, that the world is a fantastic place. What a wonderful world. So, but fundamentally, we haven't really made up our mind what this world is all about. Sometimes we think we have, but there is still a flicker of doubt. Whenever a temptation comes up, we regard it as fantastically evil or challenging, and we don't jump sideways like a temperamental horse. There's a big problem with that. We have not accepted our world thoroughly, properly, and fully. And this, I think, we all are familiar with this sense that we react nervously with regards to what happens. And we can also see then sometimes there are persons where whatever happens, they just say, okay, this is what there is. They seem to be at ease with their world, where we might resent our world. We might get on the phone to our friends and say, look, now this has happened to me. Whereas others, these same things happen, and they just tag along with whatever there is. So there's a problem that we have. We're not accepting our world. It should be different. We are under the illusion that it should be something we could control. Trungpa says, the world we are talking about is a very simple world, an extremely simple world which is made out of concrete, plastic, wood, stones, greenery, pollution, and thin air. Actually, every one of us is sitting or standing on that world. Shall we say, this is the real world, or should we pretend that the world is something else? You and I are both here. If we feel guilty, it's too late. This is our world here, right now. We could say, hey, that's not true. I can get out of my car. I can go out in my car and drive up in the mountains. I can camp in the mountains in my sleeping bag. But sleeping in our sleeping bags is the same as sitting on a rug or carpet. Somehow, we cannot get away from the world. This world is the real world, the actual world, the world we experience, the world in which we're thriving. This is the world that communicates to our sense perceptions. We can smell incense or tobacco or food cooking. We can see and hear what is around us. This is our world. And again, going back to the more classical presentations, we would see how persons like Nagarjuna and others, they would make a point when teaching the middle way, that they would say, we're not going to find, basically they would say, we're not going to find samsara and nirvana anywhere else besides looking at samsara. Nirvana will not be found anywhere outside of samsara. We're not going to, the way to the ultimate truth goes through relative truth. It's not as if Trungpa Rinpoche or our guru or the Dalai Lama or the Buddha, that they're seeing a different world. They're seeing exactly the same world, but they're seeing it for what it is. We're not seeing the world because we haven't accepted it. So the point doesn't lie in us sort of exiting into an alternative dimension, alternative reality. It's actually beginning to see our world for what it is. And this is what Trungpa Rinpoche does. And this is particularly then also what the Tantric teaching does. It brings us into the simplicity of relating to the world, but relating to the world as it is. And when we practice visualization practice, sadhana, and so on, it's beginning to open us up to the possibility that the world is not the way that we diminish it, but actually that it exists in terms of a greater reality, which is the mandala principle, which is seeing the unity of appearance and emptiness. And that is what the visualization practice is about. Sometimes people complain that Vajrayana is complex, but it's not. It's just relating actually to our phenomena. So that is introducing simplicity in all aspects. We might think that the Buddhist teaching should really just be relegated to a temple, and that's where you go in and you do the temple thing, the Buddhist thing, the simplicity, mindful thing. And that has nothing to do with the rest of the world. That only sort of prepares us for the madness of the ordinary world. But that's not at all it. Vipassana is seeing the world for what it is. And the Vajrayana understanding of deity, mantra, wisdom, sadhana, and so on, is introducing simplicity within all the range of our perceptions. So it's very much about simplicity. So Trungpa Rinpoche continues, wherever we are, we carry this world with us. If we go out to a lecture, we see the stage, the backdrop, the podium, the speaker, we smell the musty air in the hall, and we hear the seat creaking under us. When we go home, we take this world with us. We look back again and again, remembering where we have been, so we can't get away from this world. By the time we look back, of course, this world has become that world, which is the world of the past. But our memory is still of this world nevertheless. Otherwise, we could not have a memory. So we are still in this world, this real world, made out of thisness, made out of us. If somebody asks what this world is made out of, what the substance of it is 75% I and 25% am. So this is our world. This is our world. I am is our world, and we cannot get away from it. Okay, don't ask me about this one. This I find very provocative. I'm going to be thinking about it. But if you were to ask me about it, I haven't processed this yet. But this is the kind of thing. This is what's beautiful in studying the Dharma, by the way. So this is saying, don't ask me about it. I haven't understood this properly, but it's provocative, and you kind of go, This is why we take this kind of teaching home with us, and we say, what is he meaning? 75% I and 25% am? I mean, some of you probably already got it. So, but I'm just telling you, that's, for me, this is very much how the process of studying the Dharma goes, is that you hear something, and almost the best part of the teachings is the stuff that you don't get right away, and it kind of just gnaws at you. What does he mean? 75% I and 25% am, you know? Anyway, thisness, that is very much what we are as practitioners relating to. And that is, we can call it thisness, we can call it suchness, but it is what we are continually doing in terms of coming back to just the simplicity of reality. And it's within this place then that there's a dawn of vision that's greater. So Trungpa Rinpoche then speaks of the next level. Let me see if there's a lot of questions. If there isn't, I'm going to continue. It's okay. I think we can manage that. Okay. The next level is the world of emotions. It is not exactly a different world, but it is a different perspective, seeing things from a different angle. There are many ways that emotions color our experience. When we are depressed and angry, we begin to feel a grudge and to grind our teeth. We found our world fantastically aggressive. Everything is irritating, including the fence posts in the countryside that have harmlessly placed themselves there with barbed wire or electric wire going through them. We feel that we have been invaded, raped. We feel so bad about the world. When we experience aggression, we feel that everything is an expression of injustice. There is too much concrete, too much steel, too much grease, too much pollution. And we feel very angry and frustrated. We're so involved with this world of emotion that although we might have a beautiful sunny day, fantastic weather, and a fantastic view, we still grind our teeth. We feel that the world is trying to mock us. The clear blue sky is trying to mock us or insult us. The beautiful sunshine is embarrassing to look at. The fantastic full moon and the beautiful clouds around it are an insult. There is constant hate, enormous hate, so much that it's almost unreal. We feel that we're actually levitating off the ground because we are so angry. We feel that our feet are not attached to the ground, that we're hovering above the world because there is such a sense of aggression taking place. We actually have to be pretty humble to acknowledge that. Very often when we are in that space, nobody could come along and tell us this because we would completely be close to the idea that there's anything truer than the truth of all the pain and insult that we're experiencing. Nobody's going to come and tell us that my pain is not real. Nobody's going to tell us that what we're going through is not real, or that could be something, there could be some delusion taking place. So that's where, for us to actually read this passage that we've just looked at and sort of acknowledge it, requires a fair bit of letting go of our pride and a fair bit of humility. So that's about anger. But we can see this is very much, the Tibetans have a term where they say nawa jalang, which means all perceptions arise as enemies. And we could probably, even if we don't have the full experience of incredible hatred about the world, we could see how, depending on ourselves and the mind behind our perceptions, then these perceptions, they take on an experience of a world as a painful place, that our experiences are irritating on the basis of that mind. And we can also see that on the basis of a light-hearted mind, we might have a sense of the world is actually okay, that it's a nice place, that we meet interesting people and have meaningful conversations and so on. So we could very well have some suspicion that it all has to do with ourselves. This is where we're beginning to connect with, you could say, simplicity, and this is where you could say there's a real sense of actually controlling our world begins to originate. So that's about aggression. So then Trungpa says, on the other hand, if we're passionate, if we're in love, or in a lustful state, we begin to feel that there is an enormous amount of glue sprayed all over the world that is trying to stick to us. Our only frustration is that we do not have enough money to buy all the beautiful clothes we see in shop windows, all the beautiful antiques we see in the shops, and all the beautiful food or wealth that exists. We may try to project an image of aloofness, or specialness. I'm not going to be like the rest of my countrymen. When I buy clothes, I'm going to buy special ones, not like the rednecks. But that is just a sidetrack. Fundamentally, the juice of the juice is that we want so much, and we begin to spray our own glue all over things. We want to be stuck to things, to persons, objects, wealth, money, parents, relatives, friends, or whatever. So we begin to spray this crude glue all over the place. We're asking to be stuck. So this is where we're experiencing this very, what Trungpa sometimes would refer to as Padma mentality of simply loving everything and wanting to be stuck with it. I think we'll just stop here, and then I'll see if I can answer any of the questions. Might it be that all the constant criticism in Trungpa Rinpoche's upbringing was countering that basic mindlessness? I think so. That's right. That's very much it. And you could, but I'll keep reading your question. Okay. Someone who I greatly respected once stopped me during a conversation by saying, "Did you notice that you cleared your throat just then?" That single comment has remained with me ever since in all I do. It has become an ongoing trigger to be a bit more mindful. What a gift. That's true. Yes, we get lost. And so yes, undoubtedly this training that Trungpa went through had a lot to do with with coming back and being present. But of course, this is where the present discussion is interesting, because you could say the mindfulness that you were introduced to there has a lot to do with the bodily situation. But there's also then the emotional situation, which is more than just, you could say, something like clearing the throat or having some, you could say, some indication of that brings us back to being present. There's the whole pain of our existence, or the experience that we have, comfort or discomfort, that also can be something that counters basic mindlessness, and where we're presently introducing the dimension of integrating that as part of our mindfulness process. Then someone says, I thought you said there would be no tears. Well, there will be tears of joy. And even these sort of temporary little discomforts, they actually bring about greater joy. I'm going to be doing a course that's called Madhyamika without tears. It shouldn't bring any tears about. But overall, yes, we would say the Dharma is good in the beginning, the Dharma is good in the middle, and the Dharma is good at the end. And I think anybody who, for example, has given birth, of course, as a male, I can't really speak about this, but I believe that birth can be very painful, and yet it is the greatest joy. Thus I have heard. And similarly also here, in the context of the Dharma, giving birth to Bodhi, to enlightenment, there might be some birthing pains, but there won't be any regret. Anyway, I guess you can sue me on account of this. I might have said there would be no tears, but yes, there might be a little bit of discomfort here and there. But then again, it's only good. Then there's a question. It's how much ego can you really let go of? Well, this is where it's very important to have the view and to understand that there is no ego. And what we're letting go of is really just a delusion. It's just a figment of our imagination. It's a fixation. Ego is a fixation, but it's not real. And that's why meditation is so important, because if we meditate, letting go of ego is not really a big deal. It's when we don't meditate, then it's like, oh yeah, I have to let go of something, and it's painful. Then we might be a Buddhist and we might think I'm supposed to be in a particular way. But that's where, if we don't meditate, if we don't sit, and if we don't familiarize ourselves with the non-doing, boredom, actually settling into genuine confidence, then all the little sort of discomfort of ego, yes, becomes a big deal. So it's really never ever a question of how much ego can you really let go of. It's just a question, it's the recognition that we have to let go of our delusion. So there's not really an ego that we have to let go of. So then there's a question, I 75% am, I 75% and 25% is just being. Oh, that's interesting. Is that maybe, okay, so the 25% is just being. So you mean it's on one hand we have the ego of 75% and am is the thisness? Interesting, thank you. Okay, we'll have a look at that. All gets back to perception, pure or impure. Well, yes, and that's where when we talk about pure and impure, we're talking about seeing clearly or not clearly. So it's not about what's good and bad, it's simply just seeing clearly or not seeing clearly. When we talk about pure perception or pure appearance or sacred outlook, it's about seeing reality properly. And mandala is seeing reality as sacred because we're seeing it without the overlay of our delusion. So it's pure perception and it's sacred perception. It's seeing that reality and ourselves are sacred. And again, this is where we come back to the Vajrayana practice of visualization, ourselves as deity and seeing the world as mandala. It's about seeing things for what they are, not the way our confusion constructs it. Yeah. 75% I, 25% am. Is Rinpoche referring to being at the center of our own mandala, to our experience of samsara? This is something that I'd heard in terms of our relationship with the world. Possibly, yes. Possibly, yes. Yes. Somebody just introduced this. Do we have time? Let me just go back to that passage there. I'm kind of intrigued now. Somebody said something that I thought is quite helpful about this am and I. Huh? So we're still in this world, he says, up here. This real world is made out of thisness, in fact, made out of us. If somebody asks what this world is made out of, what the substance of it is 75% I and 25% am. So this is our world. I am is our world, and we cannot get away from it. Yes, so I mean, possibly the 75% could be our present neurosis, and the 25% is simply just reality, free from the grasp of our neurosis. Possibly, yes. Interesting. See here. Is Rinpoche referring to being at the center of our own mandala, our experience of samsara? Well, yes. Now, when we say our experience of samsara is when we don't experience our mandala. See, you could say our reality in its actual nature is, and this of course, yes, you're right and wrong, because yes, our reality is mandala, and yet we misconstrue this mandala as samsara. And that's why we need to take off our, you could say, our dark shades, our dark glasses that prevent us from seeing the mandala that's the true nature of our samsara. Yeah. Then someone says, the course, sign me up, please. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be happening. It's a course that I'm doing face-to-face here in Australia, in different places. But one of them I will do as an online thing. So yes, if you can't participate in what's it called, face-to-face, then it will be, we'll do it as a webinar also. Thank you. Ego as fixation, not real. Yeah, that's such an important point. And it's really the good news. This is the good news, that our illness is so curable. And the degree to which it's curable is really just the degree to which we're willing to pay attention. If we pay enough attention to our reality, then we see through this delusion. If we're half-hearted about it, then it's difficult. Then it sort of drags on a bit. But it's not easy, a given, but we don't give up. I is the noun and am is the verb. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yes. Even though we are with the am, suggesting some sort of condition, isn't it? Possibly. Anyway, food for thought, eh? Good in the beginning, middle and end. Is there something to be gained in the Dharma? Because birth isn't always joyful. It's the beginning of having a little baby that makes it worth it, and thus joyful. Well, we're giving birth to enlightenment, and as such, there's right from the start, there's something wonderful about that. And I don't know if the analogy suits entirely, if you can translate the image or the example perfectly, but definitely right from the beginning that we begin to connect with basic goodness, there's a sense of optimism that we are no longer defining ourselves or our world as intrinsically bad. You know, the selfish gene, the lowest common denominator, ego, and so on. We're beginning to have an upbeat vision. And as we practice, then we more and more connect with that. That's the middle. And the end is the complete awakening. So we would say that it is something that is good in the beginning, middle, and end. And we could possibly, we can talk about this in terms of giving birth to something wonderful, a wonderful child of enlightenment. And very often, actually, sages, they would say that as they practice, and for example, Milarepa, he talks about being somebody challenges and talks about him being alone in a cave. He very much talks about this in terms of looking after his child, which is awakening, Bodhi. I is self, am is phenomena. Maybe, yes. Maybe 75% conditions already there and 5% being sustained and built, possibly. Okay. We'll stay with this. So we have a bit of a koan to take with us from this class, I guess. I should say to you, remember one of my astrologer friends once said that I was a bit challenged because I have Mercury in Capricorn. I'm the kind of guy who I don't get the joke right away. I'm a bit slow in the repartee and in answering to witticisms and so on. So don't expect me to have the answer by next time. Huh? I'm sure you'll do better than myself. Okay. All right. So I think that's where we'll leave it this time if there are no more questions. And so we were in the middle of the discussion of passion. Yeah. Okay. Okay, just as we're leaving, yes, this course on Madhyamika without tears, finding the middle way, actually I'm calling it, but yeah, just go on the website. There'll be all the info there about where it is and when and so forth. And like I said, we'll also make sure that there'll be an online component of this. Through this virtue, may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind. In the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection, may they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you.